welcome to The Swinging Christies, the podcast about Agatha Christie in the swinging 60s. I'm Dr. Mark Aldridge. I write about Agatha Christie lots, and I watch loads of Agatha Christie, and I read lots of Agatha Christie.
Too much, perhaps.
It's so obsessed that I ended up doing a podcast.
And here we are.
Yes.
And I'm Gray Robert Brown, and I'm a writer and a Christie fan, and today, interviewer... Mark Aldridge, this is your life. Ah! No, not really. We are here to talk about your brand new book, Agatha Christie's Marple, Expert on Wickedness, which is out today in hardback, ebook, and audiobook. And to Mark... No, I don't mean you, I mean Easterbrook. To mark the occasion, we're doing a commentary track for Murder, She Said. And you can also listen on at the end to a sneak peek of the audiobook, which is very exciting. But before we get into that, Mark, Dr. Mark Aldridge, I think it's a phenomenal book. I'm so excited for it to be shared with the world. I think it's, I mean, not, you know, I was a huge fan of your previous two books, but I think it may in fact be your best yet. Why did you write it? Tell us everything.
Well, it's, yeah, 'cause you read it ages ago. It must have been a year before publication you read it.
I'm so honoured.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Yes, so it came out of... I wrote Agatha Christie on Screen, which was for a sort of academic press. And that was in 2016 that came out. And then I met David Braun at HarperCollins at the Agatha Christie Festival. And we had just a chat about various things. And he was saying that he'd read Agatha Christie on Screen and he liked it. And he mentioned that he hadn't been aware of a book called The Passing of Mr. Quin, which was a tie-in to the first Agatha Christie movie. And that they were thinking of trying to republish it. And if they did, would I write an introduction for it? And I said, yes, absolutely. Because he didn't know about it before he read about it in Agatha Christie on Screen.
Oh, did that happen?
It did happen.
Did you write the intro?
Yeah, it's over there.
But that was your accidental avenue into this, because then I was just sort of thinking, oh, what should I do next? And thinking there's so much Agatha Christie stuff that I didn't do in Agatha Christie on Screen. I'd love to do something with that. And I thought the thing I'd really love to do would be a guide to all of her books, but like that gives you a bit of history, gives you trivia, gives you an idea of its context. And I thought, well, that's obviously bigger than one book. So what if I... It's bigger than the world.
It's bigger than the world. Well, we'll see.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages.
But I thought Poirot Centenary is coming up soon. So this must have been 2017. And so I thought, well, I'll pitch it to David and say, what do you think about this? And it would be... My point to them was that it would hopefully help people discover books that they perhaps had not encountered and that they might then want to buy it. And he was keen, and after a lot of discussions that happened. But the whole point was I'd always said, look, it could be Poirot or Marple. It makes sense for it to be Poirot because of the centenary. Yeah. But if that does well enough, we could do a Marple one. Yeah. And it did well enough. And so this is how we ended up with Marple, which is quite a different book. Well, you know from reading it, it's really similar in lots of ways. But because it's only 12 novels and 20 short stories, you've got to treat them quite differently. Yeah,
well, it's interesting. I think it gave you, in a way, it let you off the leash a bit because there's technically less content, although it doesn't feel it because you've unearthed so many amazing gems and there is so much to talk about. As we found with doing this podcast, there's just every stone you lift, you find another 100 things to say. But it's given you that freedom to tell a kind of slightly different story in a way. I mean, even the fact that, which I think is a point you make in the book, the fact that Marple's canon is more weighted towards the end of Christie or the latter part of Christie's career, should we say. Even that makes it a different shape almost. It does. And it means that those are things you can explore, like these MGM movies that we'll talk about, which could only really be touched on briefly in Poirot. Loads of stuff about her career that just came to prominence later on. So, yeah, that was really exciting. And weirdly, even though there's a lot more Poirot stuff to draw on in terms of the numbers of books, the Poirot book is only about 8,000 words longer than the Marple one. So Marple's about 102,000 and Poirot's about 110. Yeah. So it meant I could do more of a deep dive and uncover more material, really. Yeah. So to celebrate publication, we thought we'd do something a little bit different. Obviously, we wanted to talk about Marple, but our heads are just so heavily submerged in the 60s that it was impossible to pull them out again. So as a result, we're going to talk about Murder, She Said. We're going to stick it on in a minute. faithful listener, you'll have heard us speaking about this on the podcast a lot by this point. But this is the 1961
yes
MGM
adaptation
film.
Of 450 from Paddington.
450 from Paddington.
Starring Margaret
book.
Rutherford, which is great, but we'll discuss that. It's quite recent, if you think. This is 1961, that was 1957.
Yeah.
That's really quick turn. That's like something from, 2020 coming out as a film now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we'll go into it now.
This is the UK DVD we're watching. If you wanted to sync it up, I can't guarantee it will work. But you could give it a go if you really want to, but you don't need to. I'm going to press play now. We're going to do it quite casually anyway, aren't we? So more of a conversation while we're watching the film.
Okay, here we are, Paddington Station. The real Paddington.
The real Paddington Station.
It looks brilliant.
Oh, look at it. It's funny because we're in the 1960s and it really works in black and white, but I would love to have had like one in colour, just to have this sense of
but then they wouldn't be consistent.
No. Oh yeah, I know, but like, isn't there a bit of you that wants to see Paddington Station 1961 in colour? I want to see what those posters all look like. Murder, She Said, no comma. Very,
right. You and this comma.
Very important.
You and this comma, you and this exclamation mark. For the listener, oh no, you'll have already heard actually that we've said that on the podcast.
We did. We said it right back in the introduction.
We did. I think we should say it in every episode.
But it drives me mad.
Punctuation pedant.
Because it's not being a pedant. It's saying, where has it come from? And you pointed out it's on the DVD case.
Yeah.
This damn comma. Absolutely nowhere.
How dare. You won't be able to hear this, listener, but the iconic... oh no, wait, that's the wrong word. I've been told off recently for using the word iconic
Maybe
for things
me.
that are... No, it wasn't you. For things that are audio, because iconic means visual.
Visual. Oh, good point.
But anyway, I was going to say the fantastic, notable theme tune, which I just think is so memorable and striking and brilliant.
It is so good. And I heard it, it's used quite often in trailers and stuff, or not trailers, but adverts. I saw it years ago. It was used to advertise, I can't remember if it was Bake Off or Sewing Bee, but it was used...
adverts for other things?
Yeah.
That's
because
weird.
it's got this George Pollock, who directs all of these Miss Marples. But it has got this sort of jauntiness. But I'd never thought of it as terribly 60s until we had this discussion like ages ago. And you were like, it's really 60s. Because I was like, oh, it's just nostalgic and light. And you're like, no, Mark, it's got a beat to it.
It's so 60s. Yeah. It's so swinging.
Steam train. All that pollution coming off that steam train now. So we should say, so this is Margaret Rutherford, who... They were looking to see, obviously, who they wanted to cast as Miss Marple. And MGM, the movie studio making this, were suggesting some sophisticated American minxes. They did not make the grade. And Margaret Rutherford was pretty much the only choice after that.
And rightly so. I think she's great. I do think she's great. I don't, everyone's got reservations about the films generally and their tone and all the rest of it, but... she is great. She is. She's really good. Especially now when she pokes her tongue out of the girl. I love that.
I have that on a GIF that I use on one of my slides when I talk. And it just plays in the background.
And contrary to what people say, I don't think that's... a murder. I don't think that's out of character for Marple. I think she would do something like that. Yeah.
I'm not quite too sure. But the point is, it's Margaret Rutherford's Miss Marple.
Yeah, exactly. Like any adaptation, it's an interpretation.
You've got to accept like that. And my problem with any adaptation... if you're going to make substantial changes, like to characters or endings or tone, don't pretend that that's what it was always like, right? Just say it's a new take on it or whatever. The problem is in a lot of this publicity, they'll say things like, Agatha Christie must have had Margaret Rutherford in mind when she wrote about Miss Marple. And you're like, no, she's a fun new take on Miss Marple, but she isn't the book.
That's all just noise around promotion though, isn't it? Especially these days. I feel like, that's not the source material. Yeah.
Well, Margaret Rutherford told the story that she was pursued for this role for a while, but she said no because she had a real big thing about glamorizing violence and criminality.
And that is in your book, is it not? And I'm going to take a little drink every time we say, and that's in the book. And it's available at all good retailers now.
Both got glasses of wine.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yes. Yes, so she didn't like anything to criminality. I'm not going to go into her biography. It's a very sad story about her back life. But basically, she'd experienced horrible crimes and deaths and stuff amongst her family. And so she didn't want to do anything that glorified it. But she was sort of convinced that actually Miss Marple was very much, she's there about finding out justice, and that she's, when she finally was convinced that actually Miss Marple was a positive presence, she called up the director on Christmas Day to give
Christmas Day 1960.
Yeah.
That's in your book, I believe.
Oh my
Available
goodness.
at all good retailers.
But you can need a box of wine at this rate.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. And I wonder if that's at least in part why the films go for this relatively jaunty, everything's going to be okay tone, because she wasn't interested in being in a, not that you can imagine her in such a thing, but in a kind of gritty, realistic take on the character. I wonder if that's the very thing that a lot of people have a pop at these films for.
Well, there's this thing about that it had to be a certificate, so it had to be suitable for all audiences,
right?
And actually, when you're dealing with something that's got several murders in it, which this has, including, we've just seen someone strangled, you have to be able to tonally get that right, that it's going to be suitable for all audiences. And she's a light character, but she's also all about justice, and it's not a scary film. And I think especially when we get to the second half, there are a couple of spooky sequences which they cut away from really quickly, and murders off screen and stuff like that.
Well, and we're only a few years at this point. This is 61. We're only a few years at this point off the real kind of moral panic that whips up in terms of the sorts of images that our kids are seeing, and the increasing licentiousness of society being seen as a real threat by a certain portion of the populace. So I think there is something in the air about kind of generally keeping that standard and being careful tonally in a way that maybe things are a bit different today.
I think this is such a strong opening of this film.
Yeah.
Like there is no time wasted. And we'll come to, when we get, I don't think the second half works as well as the first half for various reasons. But who isn't gripped by this? What an amazing, but it's obviously an amazing premise in the book as well.
It is. It's one of her best. And it's funny because it's one of those that people really remember, even if they don't really remember the rest of the book. You remember that opening because it is such a iconic image.
And this is obviously her wearing one of her capes, and as we know, capes and fashion. But I was going to say, as we're both Doctor Who fans, Damaris Heyman in The Demons wears one of Margaret Rutherford's capes.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, because they were very good friends, best friends. Yeah, very close.
Wow, that's a great fact. Is that in the book?
I don't know if it is.
It's not in the book.
It's a bonus fact.
Don't go and buy the book. The book doesn't have
It's an incomplete book.
Yeah.
So this is Stringer Davis playing Mr. Stringer.
I love their dynamic.
Oh, so real life husband.
Yeah, well, this is it. I love the metatextual dimension that we have the literature's most famous spinster starring in a series of films with her real life husband, who we are invited to believe is a real life husband, at least on some level, because he has basically the same name. His character has basically the same name.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting play with the audience, which is at its heart what detective fiction always does. It always plays with those confines of genre and what we know to be the truth and what we know to be storytelling.
No. I mean, I'm not a Rutherford biographer, but I've read the biographies and stuff of her. And when I saw some interviews with her a few years after this, I think from about 66, 67, it's on the BBC, you could see, I felt that she was struggling, but she was as in, she didn't seem like this person we see here. She seemed a little bit sort of finding it difficult to answer questions. But she was with Stringer Davis.
Right.
And so it did make me wonder, I wonder if he had been a bit of a support for her for a while. Possibly, at least on some sort of reassurance level that, if you're an older actor and you know that someone is there who's got your back and that you can lean on, I mean, whatever your health is generally, it's going to be nice, isn't it? And actually he disappears quite quickly from this one.
Yeah.
He's in the other one.
Well, it's also, more. I mean, it's a well-worn, he's just the stock side, sleuth psychic. Essentially, he's filling that plot function, isn't he? Which is something that, well, I guess you need him, because one of the interesting things about Murder, She Said, is that Marple is 3 characters in one, right?
Yes.
To expand for the listener, so I can then jump in and say it's in the book, which I believe it is.
Yes, it is. So Miss Marple in the book pretty much does a lot of it remotely, because what she does is
on Zoom.
Yeah, just on Zoom.
COVID's happening.
It says, what's the fee you've already paid for remote sleuthing? No, so we've seen her witness the murder, which absolutely makes sense. But of course, in the book, it's Mrs. McGillicuddy.
Yes,
her
what
friend.
Mrs. McGillicuddy saw. Famously.
Exclamation mark.
Exclamation mark. You're allowed that exclamation mark. Mark's not taking that away from us.
Yes. So she sees the murder. So we've already had that go. And then there's Lucy Aylesbarrow, who's this, amazing, intelligent, dynamic woman who's sort of a housekeeper because apparently she's so amazing that people pay her a premium. And she does the investigations at the house.
Yes.
Which in the book is called Rutherford Hall. But of course, you can't really call it Rutherford Hall because everyone's going to go, it's named after Margaret Rutherford. So they've had to change it for this one. But I guess she's an extra character here, laying the, a track player dressed up as a sort of track player. But this is...
Oh, she's a chameleon. Yeah. She's everything.
Well, this is a very...
part of the fun.
Modern, it is a very Margaret Rutherford take on it. But Miss Marple in the books is no stranger to pretending things.
No, that's very true.
No, I always in the Caribbean mystery, there's this thing about that she wants to see if that photo of the murderer that apparently the Colonel had before he died, she wants to know if it's in his possession. So she lies and says, he had a photo of mine in its hotel, and could I possibly go through his stuff? And, so she's quite happy to tell a fib.
Yeah, it's true. And actually with the whole kind of setting of traps in her denouement that she often does, which again, I believe is several times featuring in your book, Drink, is... there's an element of play and performance to that. Although famously, she doesn't put herself in the trap until Nemesis. I think I remember Jamie Berntal saying that to me once, and that's one of the reasons people cite that as her kind of great grand finale.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I believe she puts herself in the trap at the end of this film, no?
Yes, because she takes McGillicuddy. Well, there is this thing about Miss Marple moving like lightning or something, I think, is in the book of 450 from Paddington right at the end. Because she pretends to be choking and then... Oh, yes. Yeah, and then Miss McGillicuddy comes in and says, oh my goodness, I recognise that back. Which, funnily enough, somebody wrote to Agatha Christie to say... I think they wrote from Australia to say, that happened to me once. I recognised my students from their backs. Like, great story, thanks.
Imagine how much they paid on postage just to tell Agatha Christie that fact.
Yeah, and she wrote back, say thank you for that.
Oh, that's very kind of her. I probably would have ignored it.
This is the sequence that is always turned up in those the trailers and stuff, because it's like a funny bit where she has to be helped over the wall, because lots of the trailers were emphasising comedy.
Yeah.
Nobody can mix murder with mirth like Agatha Christie.
Famously.
That's what they would keep saying, which... Agatha Christie's witty and she can be very funny, as I often say. This is not the sort of comedy.
No, it's the difference between wit and mirth, isn't it? They're kind of aiming at something bawdier, and actually she's often her humour is a bit more intellectual than that, I think, and it's observational as well.
Richard Briers
is it really?
To be in The Good Life and Doctor Who.
God, isn't he young?
Oh yes. Oh, look. So 450 from Paddington, the choice of that, I mean, I'll talk about it later because I'll talk about when Agatha Christie saw the film. I'll dig out my quotes. But she said at the time, I never knew why they picked it for Miss Marple. And the boring truth is that, so MGM had signed this deal with Agatha Christie and Limited in 1960, which gave them the rights to... there's all sorts of details I won't go into, but basically gave them access to the vast majority of Agatha Christie's stories to adapt for the screen. There were limits, and there is a list of exemptions. So books that were not included in the deal, which included things like Murder on the Orient Express, but also included any titles that either had already been dramatised for the stage or screen. So those were exceptions.
Stage
they were
as well.
not included.
Yeah.
And any that Agatha Christie thought she might want to adapt. So and it didn't cover any later novels. So in 1960, there aren't that many Miss Marples to pick from.
Yeah.
Because actually the only one that was available was, this one and The Body in the Library. All the others, Murder at the Vicarage, had been adapted for the stage. She said that she was thinking about adapting either The Moving Finger or A Murder is Announced for the stage. A Pocket Full of Rye wasn't owned by Agatha Christie because she gave it away.
Oh, yeah.
And same with They Do It With Mirrors. She didn't own that one. She gave that one to Matthew Pritchard, her grandson.
But isn't it interesting that The Body in the Library is aka the only other option, is chosen twice over to launch a new Marple, i.e. both with Joan Hickson in the 80s and again with Geraldine McEwan in the noughties. Yeah. And they here did the opposite. They chose 450.
Well, that's true. And it's interesting that they this was shot under the title Meet Miss Marple, which absolutely says this is a franchise, right?
Yeah.
That they weren't saying, this is a one-off. They're thinking, okay, we've got to introduce Miss Marple and we'll keep coming back to her. Yeah.
Well, and they smash them out really quickly, don't they?
Yeah,
they did 4 films in 5 years?
Yeah.
4 years?
Much, yeah. So we've got lots of things.
So she's arriving at the house. So this is kind of moving into a new phase of the film, isn't it?
It is. Yes, and we may talk more about this person later.
And I've not really clocked before, but she's got golf clubs. Doesn't she play golf in the later film?
What later film?
In Gallup.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I can't remember.
Or maybe.
But there's an important plot point here because it's a way for her to investigate.
Of course.
So she plays golf and then goes, I've got to go and find my ball. And I'm searching for a body while I do it.
But she's a very active Marple, isn't she? Just generally. That's kind of, sporty and active, which is quite refreshing, actually.
Because it's interesting that this book, the one thing that it makes difficult for the screen, I think, is
I thought you meant your book, which is available at all good retailers currently.
I need a straw now. Is that, as John Curran's pointed out, it is very rare, if not the only, maybe, novel of Agatha Christie's where you know the gender of the murderer for sure at the beginning. So you know it's got to be a man. So therefore you've got to have a lot of male characters milling about, which reduces the number of female characters. And when you've got Miss Marple also being Lucy Aylesbury and also being Mrs. McGillicuddy, then you're actually making it quite a male film.
Yes, which does lead to as you kind of alluded to, the back half of the film kind of just being a lot of interchangeable men chatting and wandering around, which is a shame. It's funny, the new Murder is Easy adaptation pointed towards a male killer, and I didn't remember that. And I said to Johnny, my partner who I was watching it with, I said, it's very rare that Christie stipulates the gender of the killer. I'm wondering now if I'll have to go back to the book. I'm wondering if that's not.
I don't remember, but I haven't read that one for years.
But then it turns out not to be true anyway.
No, but I mean that's also one of the clues, isn't it, in that one, that you in the adaptation at least, where you're going. Actually, no, she didn't say he was male. She just said he was that the murderer was an important person, which he interprets as being male.
I quite liked that.
Yeah, I thought that was really
quite a clever addition. Yeah, because that is very of the time.
This is James Robertson Justice, I think, who's one of the very few actors in all of these Miss Marple films. I was saying about, what's he called in Murder Ahoy? But they both are the only ones really who say, I'm not going to be upstaged by...
you mean Lionel Jeffries?
Lionel Jeffries, yes. Because he's really going for it as well. He gives as good as he gets.
Yeah, I like that. I like it when someone goes, I see you, Rutherford. I'm gonna try and bombast you off the screen.
It's better than just being sort of one of the boring characters who mill around in some of these, like I say.
Yeah. But it's beautifully shot, actually.
It is, when you think it's sort of it's not a high budget film. It's not a cheap film, but it's made on a budget. It was made by MGM's European division, but also always with the idea of international distribution. And some sources say that it was MGM's highest grossing film of the year. I don't know how true that is, because I did try and check the figures and I came to a bit of a dead end, but it did really well financially.
Do you know, one thing we didn't say on the podcast, and listening to it and editing it back, I regretted it. When we first spoke about the MGM meal deal.
Too many sips of that wine.
That's what it is. I've mentioned buying the book too many times, available at all good retailers currently. There's some discrepancy in accounts as to how much the deal was, right?
Yes.
It gets reported as £1 million, and then
£1 million deal. It's really complicated because it basically came down to if the deal was renewed and if they made the maximum number of, because basically
like 8 films a year.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it had to be like 4 films a year.
Oh wow.
So I think that they made a figure in the tens of thousands. I don't know if I'm allowed to say even this far, away from it. But figure in the tens of thousands was paid every year just to have the rights. And then there would be an extra amount for each one they actually did.
I see.
So if they did 4 a year, then you could make £1 million over the course of 7 years or something.
But it was reported in the press as $1 million, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and I wonder if that plays into this cultural perception we have of Christie as quite kind of rarefied. But actually, I don't think she was she wasn't as rich as the person who wrote the biggest selling book the world over probably should be.
Yes. It's
So what was do you remember when you first saw this?
Well, here's the thing. I first saw this as an adult. I know.
I feel like you're expecting me to be shocked by that, but is that shocking? I don't know.
Because lots of people see these
when you went around in 1961, Mark, if that's what you mean.
So I mentioned before, back on our intro episode, I think, about when I was young, I went with my mum for the centenary.
You did.
There was a Torquay Museum thing where we picked up this bookmark.
Yes.
And the only other thing I remember about it, because I was quite young, is that there was a picture of Margaret Rutherford up. And I remember saying to Mum, "Who's that?" And Mum saying, and if you're a big Rutherford fan, please cover your ears, saying, "Oh, she was Miss Marple. She wasn't very good." Aww. So therefore, in my head, that just became the truth.
Yeah.
But
many people would say that, to be fair. We're not, big shout out to Mark's mum if you're listening. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're comparing her to people like Joan Hickson, who we'll come on to, then she's so different than if you're like me, where Joan Hickson was Miss Marple, so Miss Marple I was familiar with.
Yeah,
then this is
it's
such
the way
a
that
different
people feel
take.
about David Suchet being the ultimate.
Yeah, whereas I can't really get on with Albert Finney. Whereas,
oh my God, I tried showing my mum, my sister, and my nan Albert Finney at Christmas, and my sister said, "Is this a Mickey take?" And Nanny was like, "Oh, he's not as good as Suchet, is he?"
It's an interesting form. Romantic.
I like
chimp.
it. Benedict Morrison, our friend Benedict, really likes him.
Yeah,
I think
lots of people
his favourite.
do.
I like him. I think Benedict said that on She Done It, in fact.
Oh, yeah.
But you didn't say so. Presumably, then you rushed home and watched Rutherford that afternoon after having seen a picture of her
no.
and talking
Because that meant I never really paid attention to them because they must have been shown on afternoon TV at the weekends, like loads of Agatha Christie's were. But I never really noticed them. Maybe I skipped over them because I used to always watch when Evil Under the Sun was on, or that used to be repeated all the time. That's really that and Witness to Prosecution are the best.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because those are the ones, and Finney are the ones that I have kind of this vague, almost like race memory, kind of just flickering behind my eyes, kind of inherited memory from childhood that all British kids are just kind of born with some kind of sense of those images and those films and vague recognition of them. So I feel like those were repeats that I must have sat in front of at least for 10 minutes before waddling off and doing something else. But yeah, I don't really remember. Like you, I don't think I saw this until I became an adult Christie fan.
And this terrible thing of dubbing children's voices with women's voices.
Is he dubbed?
Yeah, yes. Like this way sounds like Village of the Damned. One of the Midwich
Well, I mean, it's not. I
It's
have to watch it again with
creepy.
the sound turned up, but I don't think I'd ever spotted that, to be fair.
And here we are. We had a little meeting earlier, but the two marples.
The two marbles.
So there are some things when I do a talk, so you've always got to balance like the old stuff or, the nice familiar with the new. And this is one of the things that always have to have a couple of insurance points where you're like, people will like that, whatever else it is. And this scene is one of my insurance choices because people just love seeing Joan Hickson, who had become Miss Marple in 20 odd years, and Margaret Rutherford together in the scene.
Is that the only bit? Yeah, because she's about to die, isn't she?
Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit earlier when they were together when she arrives at the house.
Oh, was there?
Wow. Yeah.
So it's very brief, but yeah, it is a nice kind of passing of the mantle.
Yeah.
I wonder if Kenneth Branagh's ever acted opposite David Suchet. He must have been in something with him.
I wonder. I'm not sure.
Not Poirot, but...
God, yeah. I mean, thing is, it's all very well being an investigator, Miss Marple, but she's got to do all the work as well. She actually has to do all the cooking.
Yeah, but again, I think that's something I really like about Rutherford's Marple is she just muck in and get her hands dirty. And she is a comedian. If you want her to be a bit sort of hoity-toity, she can be that. But if you also want her to play the maid, she could do that as well. She can do it all. She can do it all, Mark.
Well, I love it in They Do It With Mirrors that Agatha Christie has, Miss Marple's being asked to go and investigate what's happening at this house. And she's basically told, perhaps you could just pretend to be poor and they'll take you in and be sympathetic to you. And she's like, yes, that's very sensible. She's got no, ego about that. Whereas I think many of us would say, I don't know, I particularly want to call up an old friend and say, I'm very poor. Could I come and stay with you for a couple of months?
And that's exactly what I did this morning.
Yeah, you're
That's why
here
I'm
right
here.
now. Actually. Yeah, that's true. Oh my goodness. Yes. That's why I've got the wine. But yeah, things like this lighting's very nice, isn't it? And it's,
yeah, it is. And so the studio stuff they shot at Ealing.
I don't think it's either.
Borehamwood.
Borehamwood. None of it's because loads of films were made in this sort of area where loads of studios at the time that would be just sort of north of London, generally.
They definitely play her theme music less in this one than they do later on. I guess because later on it becomes so associated with...
Borehamwood. Yeah. But it's near 12th Street. Oh! Bit of unnecessary comedy, but it's nice all the same. Oh,
is that relevant?
I don't think so.
No. Just a bit of business. Just a bit of business that the actors worked out.
Yeah, they're like...
In the rehearsal.
They're like, we've got to get from that end of the set to this end of the set. We want you to show off the rug in some way, Margaret, if you could. And our token American.
So, I mean, spoilers. We don't need to worry about that, do we?
No.
So this is the murderer.
Yeah.
That's quite late.
That is late.
Crops up. How far? We've been going quite a while.
Yeah.
Half an hour?
Yeah, nearly half an hour. Well, it's the weird thing about this story generally. And again, credits John Curran, although I don't think it takes... You can be less of a genius than John Curran to notice that the solution to this mystery seems to sort of come from nowhere. And that includes the identity of the murderer, that actually you've just sort of got to go with it a little bit. This is where it slips away a little bit, I think, the premise. But this is clearly... You would often have to get a bit of an American casting. This stuff, you have to have one American star in these, which, And actually, some of the American reviews were quite critical of it and saying that actually it's sort of Arthur Kennedy, this guy's called. It was quite distracting when an American turned up and sort of ruined the English ambience.
Oh, really? I mean, that still happens today, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You get a certain main cast member to appeal to a certain section of the audience where they want to distribute.
Yeah, I mean, you look at something like Sex Education, and Gillian Anderson is getting that, in the first series.
It's very true. And Shooty Gat was there to appeal to the Scots.
Part British as well, but comedy. There's nothing quite like that. I was just about to say, have you ever had an injection in your bottom? But it happens all the time in films, doesn't it?
This, so.
But it's that sort of thing that's a comedy sequence in films. It's a very carry-on thing. And the guys who wrote this did write some sort of
I was
scrap
just about to say, if indeed they did shoot it in Elstree and Bournemouth, then that's where they shot a lot of carry-ons.
But they wrote sort of comedy films and stuff, and they wrote quite a variety of stuff. David Purcell and Jack Seddon, and they
and do they write all of the?
They write 3 of them. They don't do Gallop.
Oh, interesting.
So they do Murder Most Foul and Murder Ahoy.
I think Foul is my least favourite.
Yeah, it's a bit of a.
It's just a lot of standing around with Ron Moody.
It's a lot of
being moody.
Ron Moody. It's that whole clairvoyant thing that drives me a bit. Like, oh, for goodness sake.
I really like Gallop.
Yeah, Gallop's great. So when I gave my talk at the Agatha Christie Festival in Torquay, I'll be back there September this year. Please come along. So will Gray. Gray will be there too.
I will.
Yes. Doing various things that I'm sure would be announced by the time this is out. I hope so. Anyway, when I did it last year, so they normally ask me to suggest a screening for after my talk. And I suggested Murder at the Gallop because I think this one is very widely known and seen. And it is good.
Yeah.
But
it's also very close to the source material. And it is a Marple novel. Whereas with Gallop, it's far enough away that it's interesting, but not so far away that the series has gone mad, aka Ahoy. And
I love the Murder at the Gallop, and it has got such an interesting backstory. So I should say just quickly, so Murder at the Gallop is based on After the Funeral, which is a Poirot novel. And Agatha Christie was very upset about this, as indeed was Rosalind, her daughter, because she didn't think that was permitted. Well, not so much she didn't think that was permitted. She didn't think they were allowed to make original films, which is what they did with Murder Ahoy, the 4th one. But she certainly thought it went against the spirit of what she believed. Anyway, but the thing that really upset her was, of course, that they inevitably made a tie-in paperback edition of Murder at the Gallop, which of course has got After the Funeral in it, which is completely different in loads of ways, not least the fact that Miss Marple's not in it, but it had a whacking great picture of Margaret Rutherford on the cover. Yeah. And she would, there's a story that Agatha Christie writes to her agent and says that Rosalind had, I think Rosalind writes to her agent to say that she'd spoken to even the manager at her local W.H. Smith, who agreed how terribly misleading it is. And I just love this idea of you just quietly pootling on and talking W.H. Smith or something. And Rosalind was a fearsome character in many ways. She was very protective, and quite right too. But the idea of her coming up and saying, "What do you think about this paperback?" You think, oh, goodness. This is her golf.
I'm just thinking, I wonder, she has so many costumes. I wonder if anyone's counted.
Some of them came up for auction.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She changes so much.
That's true.
It's fascinating. But again, this is compounding my chameleon theory.
Yes, she can sort of blend in. Yeah, you're right. I do think about this whenever I pass a country house on a train.
Yes, me too. Yeah. And whenever you
when would you push the person off? Well,
that's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking what you're thinking. But it's and whenever a train draws parallel.
Yes,
I've been on trains with people that I wouldn't really knew anything about Christie. Going, oh, look out the window. It's like that Christie. It's like that Agatha Christie.
Wow.
Like it's that well known as a conceit, which is hilarious because it isn't one of her better known novels.
No, I think that opening premise is quite well known, but not.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. It's not like.
Those mysterious albums.
Yeah, so I might like to investigate.
Do you know, I remember I first read this book, Four Fish from Paddington, when I was about 13. It was one of the first Christies I read. It may have been in third or fourth or something. It was I read it straight after Cards on the Table. I remember that. But I read it simply because I'd read the plot summary of what the kind of conceit was, that opening image, and thought, oh, that sounds brilliant. And And I really vividly remember being absolutely baffled by what a sarcophagus could be.
Oh, really?
I had absolutely no idea.
Oh.
I remember Googling it. I still didn't really understand after I Googled it. I'm not sure I understand now. It's just a tomb, essentially.
Yeah,
isn't
it
it? But then
there are different ones because you can get like ornamental ones. You can get ones that are sort of big stone boxes. Which is what this one's a bit like.
Herein lies my problem, I think, then, with this, which is that is it that surprising to find a body in a sarcophagus? Would it be more surprising to find it in, I don't know, a walk-in fridge freezer? Do you know what I mean? I think there's something tomb, body. It's like,
I wonder what the plan, maybe it's in the book and I just don't remember. I wonder what the plan was for after this. Like, just presumably that body wasn't going to stay there forever.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Like at some point you're going to have to remove it. It's going to start to. I mean, there's a dog there. It's going to start to pong a bit.
Mark,
well,
keep it clean, please, for Mark. Just because I haven't said it in a while, but the Agatha Christie's Marple Expert on Wickedness is available now at all excellent retailers.
Do you like the subtitle?
Please have a look in your local bookshop. Support local booksellers if you are able to.
Yes, do. It took ages to think of that subtitle, Expert on Wickedness. And it's from the Moving Finger, sort of.
Yes, I remember us talking about your subtitle.
Because I had a bad one before, but I can't remember.
Yes, I wasn't keen on the other one.
No, I wasn't either, but I couldn't think of a better one.
And then when you said Expert on Wickedness, I think my reaction was, that's great, but I don't know where that's from. But it's from Moving Finger, isn't it?
It's Moving. So nobody quite says
I haven't read that
Expert on Wickedness, but somebody says that she is an expert on wickedness. If you see what I mean, it's not those three words. Don't appear.
Sure, yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's quoting.
But there was,
you're massaging the truth.
And I'm also massaging an old, I think, Pan or it might be Fontana cover, which has got on the cover of Moving Finger, investigated by Miss Marple or something, expert on wickedness.
Oh, brilliant.
So I was like, yeah. It's just good. It's just that is what she is. Like she would never say I'm the greatest detective in the world, like Poirot was, but or said he was. But she absolutely would know that she's an expert on wickedness.
Yeah, and that comes through as you go through the book. I think you really, like with Poirot, I feel like as you progress through your book, you feel like you get to know that character through the knowledge that you garner. You know, it's not a biography. It's not like Anne Hart's books. It's not like a biography of that character. No. But you get to know them through their appearances, which is quite clever, really. And
the sort of different interpretations as well. It was interesting that, and it's in the book, that when I interviewed Julia Mackenzie, who is obviously played Miss Marple, but has played amazing parts, stage and screen.
She's such a phenomenal actor.
A phenomenal actor. And she says that playing Miss Marple might be the toughest thing she'd ever done.
Really?
Because Miss Marple, as written, has to be quiet and sort of observant. And is also meant to be the star of a TV series.
Yeah, you have to steal the scene without doing anything that steals the scene.
Exactly. Which in the way that they tackle it here is that she isn't quiet, she's boisterous.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. News of the World he's reading. But lots of the reviews are saying we're highlighting Rutherford as one of the main reasons to see the film. But they were also so cruel about her all the time. It was, the way that she looked, that people would say, bulldog features or whatever, a gargoyle.
It's awful.
Yeah, you never say that.
It's really unnecessary. Again, I mean, this lighting is superb, really. I mean, really, I guess black and white is quite forgiving. I know what you mean about it would have been nice to see it in colour or see one in colour, but black and white is very classy. It does
suit it. It's just, it would have been something quite fun to have seen, especially the modern London. I think more the Alphabet Murders actually is sort of crying out to be Technicolor.
Yeah, it really should. It probably improve it. I mean, it can't make it worse. It's pretty terrible as it is.
Pretty terrible.
And it's quite late before we've found the body.
Yeah, and again, this is one of the... I guess we know there's a murder and there must be body. But then that's sort of because actually the body and stuff doesn't give us great clues.
No, it's true. And I guess we do know... Well, we've kind of had the body... trailed to us because we saw the act of murder, whereas we haven't in other titles.
Because the identity of the victim is so sort of secondary is in the book in particular, really, that it's really a bit of a, again, John going through the notebooks was pointing out that Christie changed her mind quite a lot about who it might even be, because it sort of isn't that relevant. Here we go. Oh, it is. It's like a proper Egyptian sort of one here.
I wonder, there's probably a fascinating post-colonialist reading to be made of this outbuilding.
Yes, just casually littered with treasures from...
And what do we find in it? We find a life extinguished. It's actually quite potent in the book. I'd love to revisit that bit of the book and see what there is to garner there. So, obviously, you've written this book about Poirot. You've written this book about Marple. Do you have a favourite?
What, book or detective?
Detective.
So, I do prefer Miss Marple as a character.
That's the correct answer. Well done.
I do, but I would say that on the whole, Poirot gets stronger mysteries to solve.
Mysteries.
As
emphasis on the
puzzle,
word mystery.
Yeah, the puzzles are perhaps tend to be a bit tighter and stuff. And I think that's why we see more Miss Marples. One of the reasons why we see more Miss Marples later on is because actually Agatha Christie isn't doing quite as many tight puzzle mysteries. And Miss Marple lends herself more to these sorts of stories that are very instinct driven and that are very much... But
I believe you make that point in the book, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to say it at this point. You know the drill, people. You know the drill. But no, you do. I remember reading that. And it's true. It's funny. We have such a thing about the puzzle mysteries as Christie fans. We've got this perception through years of criticism that they're the best and everything else is woolly, rather than everything else being trying to do something different. It's a different genre. And I don't think it's automatically a criticism to say that something isn't a puzzle mystery, unless it's reaching to be one and failing, which a couple of them do. But sometimes, I think having Marple in what is kind of like a thriller like Bertram's is really fun.
Yes. I agree. And I think that Miss Marple works particularly well when placed. I'm more convinced by her being moved into that sort of thriller stuff than I am by, say, Poirot in...
I agree. The
Big Four.
Do you have a obviously, because we're swinging Christies, do you have a favourite 60s Marple?
Well, yeah, it's funny. We talked about this the other day, and I think I've changed my mind from it already. Instinctively, I would say that I think the mirror character is probably the best as sort of a puzzle, but I also think it's very solvable.
Yeah, see, you've said that to me before, and I think that's my favourite, and I don't care that it's solvable.
No.
But then I'm one of those weird people that I don't read puzzle mysteries to play the game. I kind of let it wash over me. I'm there for other things like character and story beats and atmosphere. Yeah,
I mean, I am too, really, but it depends what mood I'm in as well. I mean, Bertram's is definitely the one that's gone up most of my estimation in the last couple of years. I'm not sure I'd say it was the best one.
No, but I think we both really discovered a passion for it when rereading it for this project in particular, didn't we?
I mean, I would sit and read that again over maybe 2/3 of other Agatha Christie books. It's just, there's something about it that really appeals to me.
It's very charming. It's
so
very
atmospheric.
Clever. Yeah.
And I've always, there's this thing about when you're younger, or again, pre-internet really, and you don't really understand where things sit in the canon. A Caribbean Mystery for me was one of the big titles, and I don't know why particularly. Maybe from TV or whatever, but it always felt like one of the big ones. And it sort of surprised me that as I got to know my Agatha Christie better, that it was sort of like it's an okay one for the 60s. Yeah. Whereas I think it really works. And again, lots of atmosphere.
I hate that perception. Not your perception. I mean that perception that more widely some fans have.
Yeah.
I wonder if it just sticks out in the canon though when you're younger or new to Christie, because it's so far flung, because it's so quote unquote exotic.
Yeah.
So Craddock,
yes,
he's very handsome.
Yes,
I feel like he's good, and he recurs through all of the films.
I think in this awful. It's Charles Budd Tingwell is an Australian actor.
Oh yes.
And yes. So he's He does. He's one of those people who's younger than you think.
Yeah, I think he has a good relationship with Rutherford, and that was something I really liked about the Miracracked play that we saw.
Yes, that day that our trains almost passed because we were both. Do you remember we were both at Reading Station? I think on the same platform.
Did we have a 450
and
moment?
We did have a 450 moment, and then my train broke down, and I was saying I should have sprinted across the platform and got on yours.
Wow. There we go.
Yes.
But yes, that day we saw the Miracracked tour with Susie Blake in Oxford at the Oxford Playhouse.
Youngest people there by about 30 years.
I'm going to cut that. And I can't. It's a commentary track. It's one of the things that stood out to me was her relationship with Craddock. I thought
yes, it's lovely.
They have a really nice little few little scenes together.
And I was actually, because I hadn't read it for a long time before that, because I was not at the point with the project I'd got that far, and it quite surprised me when I read the book again. I was like, oh, those scenes are all in the book, but because so much else is happening, I sort of hadn't really taken it in before. But loads of stuff where he's talking about his family history and stuff. And what really struck me is that that's such an easy thing to cut for a play adaptation, right?
Yes.
That's like obvious things.
But it would have robbed it of a lot of heart. And we're glad that they didn't. Yeah, because even I didn't remember, doesn't he call her auntie? And I didn't remember that. And I remember kind of sitting in play being like, oh, they're trying to make him kind of Raymondy or whatever. But that is in the book. And that, I mean, they made it more explicit in the play, but that idea that she's becoming some sort of surrogate older family member, motherly, some sort of figure to him, is really sweet.
Well, there's an Indian film, and that's got a little thing at the opening that says that this is dedicated to all the mothers and aunties and everyone who quietly sit and worry about their children or something along those lines. But what I thought was really interesting is that because of cultural differences, I guess, Miss Marple had to be placed much more readily in a family in that adaptation.
Sure.
So she's much part of an extended family. So there are ways that with Raymond West and stuff that we do get it in the original books and stuff, but that for different audiences you pick up on different things. So internationally you're going to say, okay, these are the elements of Miss Marple that's going to be most important for the domestic audience. And for India, it was that. But for elsewhere, South Korea did one. And for them, it was about her being an independent, strong figure. And that's what we got a lot of in Musmar Nemesis.
Oh, yes. I must watch that. I haven't watched that yet. Oh, fantastic. Oh, yes. And I must watch that. Is it a 60s film, that Indian?
No, it's from the 80s, actually.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting that someone met, because I was in India a couple of months ago, and someone mentioned it to me, and I was like, oh, it's got cultural currency. Like, because sometimes you look up at these things and you think, was that seen by 17 people? Because I've got no real way of knowing. Yeah.
I'll watch it before I go. I've got a month.
Oh, yes, of course. Ugh.
Listener, we're basically just talking over the extended scenes of white men sitting around chatting.
Boring middle-aged men chat. For me,
Rutherford's doing some good observing acting, which is quite nice. She's very kind of hawk-like.
And I think so once Agatha Christie saw this film, this is what she identified as a problem with it. And how perceptive was she to say that when the brothers turn up, it gets much less interesting. And she's absolutely right, because you sort of watch and go, okay, maybe one of these is the killer.
I don't really care.
Who cares?
It's a bit too little too late structurally, but also it'd be nice to see them in action. Rather than just kind of sitting around.
There is this thing, which is very common, I guess, even in films now, of where you go, he seems a bit old for like, do you believe that like, are they being cast as if they're meant to be some sort of young couple? Like you quite often get male actors. Male actors tend to, I think, look older than the women they are wooing in films of this period. But it's this, I was saying in one of the other episodes, I think the sex episode, that the sex in the Margaret Rutherfords, it's all very coy about, I think.
I don't know, they just had a pretty big smooch.
Was it? I'm not sure. She's very, yeah.
So what, it's undeniable that we sort of touched on it earlier that Marple is significant in the 60s. She gets 3 outings, not to mention these 4 films. Is that everything? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
What is there? Is there a way that you would kind of characterize? I remember the 60s segment. Obviously, I'm biased, but I remember the 60s segment of your book, available now, being really kind of striking. Is there a way that you would characterize Marple in this period? Do you think her characterization has changed at all?
Yeah, well, it does change all the way through. That she's almost like sort of malevolent in like things like, but she is in things like Murder at the Vicarage, where she's like scares people because she's so on the ball, and she does get a little bit fluffier, but while still being as perceptive. Like, people do start to describe her as that, which I don't think you would do earlier on. So she's still got all of the same strengths as before.
Yeah.
But I think she's perceived a little bit differently.
Yeah. I also think we're peeling the onion. People are so keen to kind of go, oh, that's a continuity error.
Yes.
But I mean, I think 2 things. One is what Benedict Morrison would say if he was here, which is that, she's a character and she's not a real person, and she serves the kind of function of the story that we're telling at that moment, and if she changes, there's that's why. But the other argument to make is well, we all contain multitudes, and so does Miss Marple, and she can be her amazing powers of perception and her expert on the fact that she's an expert on wickedness can be both scary and intimidating to some people, and fluffy and reassuring to others.
Yeah. Well, we were even chatting earlier about whether Ariadne Oliver drinks or not. We were trying to work it out, and we found that in Cards on the Table, she's drinking a sherry, but then says later she doesn't really like the taste.
She fell off.
And we were like, well, these are actually not necessarily contradictory things. You want to say, there's an instinct to say, oh, well, she doesn't drink. Okay, well, actually, you might just occasionally have a sherry and say, but
that doesn't mean
I don't
she doesn't
like it or
drink that much. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because the thing was that she doesn't drink much.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And also, who among us can honestly say we don't have a sherry now and again? I mean, I certainly do. I've got one in my cupboard at home as we speak. Also, maybe that's just what she does while she's playing bridge.
That's true.
Maybe it's a bridge only thing. Like I try to only have coffee when I'm sitting down to write.
Do you?
And I don't. All of this podcast has been planned with coffee, with the support of coffee.
I see.
We wouldn't be here
Things
otherwise.
they must take the stimulants away from you.
Just be glad it was a stronger substance.
Yeah.
And that the podcast still makes sense. All the editing, all of it, it's all been done under the influence of sweet caffeine. See, another outfit, and that's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting outfit, isn't it? Yeah.
Dare I say, a little fashionable. I'm obviously, we've just recorded the fashion episode, so I'm still stuck in fashion mode. But
look at Mr. Stringer there, who purchased like that sort of thing that a director would say, and you sit there and go, okay, I appreciate I've got to be here to be in shot, but
yeah, I think Marple would say, get off there.
Yes, don't sit on the arm, you'll break it.
Sit on the arm of the sofa.
Oh, she's going to have a beer then.
She contains multitudes. How many more times?
It's got a telly. That's interesting, isn't it? That you don't think of Miss Marple sitting down to watch TV. I can't even remember if it's in the book or whether it's just in the adaptation of where at Bertram's Hotel they say that there's a TV lounge. It's for the Americans.
Yeah. I can't remember if you say this in the book or if somebody else has said this, but isn't her cottage big?
Yeah, no, I complained about it for The Mirror Cracked, the film, the Angela Lansbury one, where she lives in this cottage stroke mansion, this thatched mansion.
Yes, you do,
and actually, I think I took that out of the final version because
of Marple.
Yeah,
I think. Do you not say it on screen as well?
Oh, possibly. Yeah.
I wonder what that shield of awards is for. Good.
Probably darts.
Good detective.
just the local darts champion.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, there is this thing about that you want to have a big aha moment when a murder is revealed. And I think that having Dr. Quimper doing it, you just sort of go, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah. He's also the only kind of male guest star other than Craddock, which it can't be, and Stringer, which it can't be really, that's properly built up.
Yeah, yeah.
Because as we've said, the brothers are kind of interchangeable. So if you've got your brain engaged, you probably would expect it to be him. But then I never, as I said, I'm terrible at I never guess. I never watch or read these things for that personally. It is a suspiciously large coat, though. I feel like he is hiding secrets underneath
hiding
it.
Gloves that he'll take out. And
an ABC railway guide so he can track which trains go near which big houses.
It's funny that the book is more explicit about the fact that it's just before Christmas because Mrs. McGillicuddy's coming back with their Christmas shopping.
So it is.
Which I think the cold, it's all relevant. But also, this was the point that they were Christies for Christmas.
Yeah.
So you would want.
There you go. 450 from Paddington is the forgotten Agatha Christie Christmas special. And one day we'll get an adaptation that leans into that, hopefully.
So I think that they do it obviously for the Joan Hickson series. And I think that's very accomplished.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, really?
I did. I remember really liking the Geraldine McEwen one when I was younger, but I haven't rewatched it as an adult.
I don't remember it. I've just rewatched them all, and I don't remember that one particularly.
It's Pam Ferris, isn't it? Gillicuddy.
Oh yes,
and it's really early. It's like episode 2.
Yes,
or 3.
That first set of 4 are much closer to,
much more faithful.
Yeah, to the Marple that many of us would recognise.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm personally not overly keen on Geraldine McEwen's portrayal. Well, I've just been watching, thanks to you because you gave me the DVD, I've just been watching Geraldine McEwen play Miss Jean Brodie for a TV series in
Is that any good?
The 80s. It's interesting, and she's really good in it. And it did make me more willing to consider her portrayal as, how sometimes you see an actor in something else, they impress you more than they have before, and then you think, oh, I'll reevaluate their other performances now, because there's clearly more going on there than I thought.
She is a great actor. I mean, she was great, I've seen her in lots of things she was amazing in. For me, I don't think she ever quite got a handle on Miss Marple. No.
People have a pop at the poking out the tongue in this, but I tell you what's not Miss Marple is going, Eureka! Remember she does that? I'm sure she does that at some point. Is that in the book? Don't buy the book because you missed out the fact that she says Eureka sometimes. No, I will double check that. I'm sure she does.
So again, we've got a little bit of creepiness.
Yeah. She really sells that moment.
Yeah. But I'd be like, I do look at this and go, and which brother are you?
Yeah.
Because I think I was talking to you about this actually, that in both of the TV adaptations, they go to much greater lengths to really differentiate them. So they're dressed differently, they act differently, whereas this is just a few guys in suits, right? It's like you don't think you really get a sense as to, if this guy were to be revealed to be the killer at the end, well, I mean, I couldn't name him.
Yeah, it's true.
They're so, I mean, we have been talking over it, so maybe that would make sense.
Have we?
Yeah.
It is interesting that, there is a world in which the angle of her view on the murder could be such that you couldn't tell that it's a man strangling a woman.
Yeah.
And it's significant, I think, that Christie chooses to give you that, because the point of the crime is it's a man killing a woman. It is fundamental, and it's the way that a lot of men sadly did and do kill women, and it is a gendered violent crime that's being investigated here. And
it really obviously upsets Mrs. McGillicuddy in the book. It's depicted as properly shocking, not just a sort of clean little death of a puzzle to be solved, but an actual traumatizing thing to witness. And of course,
maybe that's something you lose slightly by having it be Marple and then her rolling into hijinks, because you can't kind of linger on that reaction, really.
Yeah, she's not traumatized by it.
No, not at all. And like you say, because of the rating of the film and everything, you have to kind of, it's a bit more hammily staged in this, and then you have to kind of roll on with the punches slightly, don't you?
Yeah. No, you may not borrow that. How rude. I stuck Miss Marple in the dark. So, do you have a Miss Marple portrayal that you particularly like? Because for me, I am one of the, Joan Hickson is for me the Miss Marple.
Yeah, see, I don't quite see... I really respect Joan Hickson's portrayal and that series. I discovered it fairly recently, really, comparatively, and I don't quite have the same love and kind of nostalgia for it that a lot of people do.
No. I think some of them can be a bit slow now.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. Lovely. I don't find her particularly warm, and I do think, although she's kind of sinister and sharp, there is also an underlying warmth to Marple at times that I never really see in Hickson personally. Whereas I feel that a lot from Julie Mackenzie, who, I think
she's so good.
By far, for me, the Marple. I think she was slightly let down in the production stakes, but is a fantastic actor. Yes,
she's so good. But they're not my favourite adaptations, but that's no fault of hers. Those golf clubs have come in handy again.
Yeah, there you go.
You see, contains multitudes. She'll play with the golf club, but she'll
sleep with it. Apparently. Yeah, she was curled up with it. She's missing Mr. Stringer,
smack you.
So she's spooning the golf club instead.
Oh no. Oh dear. Oh yes, all this food poisoning. She's very good at her food poisoning mysteries, Agatha Christie. Because there's always this thing about, when was it introduced? And, are you faking it? And, it's...
Yeah. Well, it's poison generally, isn't she? She's just the queen of poison.
Oh, we don't look well. Oh, no. Well, that was quick. Again, though, I'd watch and go, so which one was that?
Yeah, it's true. Is that Quimper?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's got quite a few buttons undone there. Okay, is that to imply that he's been caught?
It's middle of the night. Yeah.
Oh, maybe that's his PJ top.
Yes.
I'm highlighting the important things here.
Yeah. Just on fashion.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you're looking at clothes.
It's a one-track mind.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Very scientific.
So when I was 13 and first getting into Christie, I decided that what I was going to do was write 3 play adaptations of Agatha Christie.
Wow.
Based on pretty much the only 3 books of hers that I'd read. And I was going to do a Poirot, which was Cards on the Table, so I read that. And then I was going to do a Marple, which was 450 from Paddington, so I read that. And then I was going to do a miscellaneous, which was Towards Zero, which to this day is still one of my favourite Christie books. But I had a whole folder on it, and I think I wrote all of a script of Cards. That somewhere I've got my own adaptation of Cards on the Table for the stage, and I think I did about 3 scenes of 450, and then put it down and never picked it up again.
Oh,
and here I am,
and here you are now,
wishing that I'd.
You could have just read it out to us for the whole.
Yeah. Settle in, listener.
Yes.
The content coming after we finish the commentary is just a long reading.
13-year-old Grace.
From me, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think part of the reason I picked those 3 is because they'd all been fairly recently adapted at that point. I think.
Yeah, I guess.
Cards on the Table had just been done for Poirot. That was one of the first Poirots I watched. This had been fairly recently done with Geraldine, and then Towards Zero was Geraldine as well. So that was Superintendent Battle investigates.
Yes.
That's towards zero.
That's the series waiting to happen,
isn't it? Well, it could have been. It could have been.
I'm trying to work out what she's got. Is it a hairnet she's got on? Something she's got on her head.
Yeah, it's giving Greg's, isn't it?
There was one of the Miss Marple short stories when I was going through the original magazine versions of it. It's got several extra sequences in it, which is not uncommon, that they would then get edited again for book. But it had Miss Marple having to have a conversation perched on a toilet.
What?
Which made a big point because she had to have a private conversation about what was going on, and so they picked the bathroom, and so she had to perch on the edge of the toilet. So if they'd done that in
but is that
Geraldine McEwen or Julia Mackenzie?
Oh, imagine.
Yeah. It might not be.
In the Marple book?
It is in the Marple book. It might not have been in the version you saw, actually.
Well, there you go.
Because there are what to do. Came up later. Yes, if you want to know which short story that is and read the quotes, I'm going to leave that dangling for you.
What a cliffhanger! That's hilarious because do you remember when we saw again the Mirror Crack play the Susie Blake play?
Oh yes.
One of the first thing that happens for those of you that haven't seen it, the first thing that happens in the version that we saw is the lights come up, Marple staggers on stage, and of course we know that in that story she suffers a fall fairly early on in the development and twists her ankle.
Yeah.
You might not know that. I'd forgotten that. I hadn't read the book for a while. She comes on with a bandage around her ankle, trailing behind her, which looked like... What did it look like, Mark?
It looked like it was toilet paper.
It looked like she'd stepped on some toilet paper, like a bad sitcom, and was trailing that behind her. She'd just left the bog and she was coming on to
There is a commode joke. I can't remember if it was in the version we saw or not.
No, it's cut. And you do say that in Marple as well, yeah. Yeah,
because there was quite a few. Because also we were looking at photos from the first tour run, and that's got Miss Marple in trousers.
It has.
She did not wear trousers. She was wearing a skirt, should be said.
Yes, but in the version we saw. Yeah.
Yes, in the version we saw.
Yeah, there was loads cut, wasn't there? There was a war lover. That appeared on stage,
which was only mentioned briefly in the version we saw. But gosh, that version. I just remember saying how exhausting it looked to be a part of, because it's one of those productions that nearly everyone is on stage for so much of it, playing multiple roles.
Sort of twirling around in that.
Twirling around. And then they go to the movie studio and they've all got to pretend to be someone else. And I was going, oh my goodness, I'm tired just watching them. Yeah. This is the matinee. They've got to do it again tonight.
Yeah.
That's why we were so young.
Having a glass of wine. Sitting back and reclining. Exactly like we're doing right now.
Yeah, we are on the same. This is why we might sound a bit different today. It's not just the glass of wine that both of us have had. It's that we are sitting down. Oh, look.
I do think the sets are very good, actually.
Yeah, they're
very
really
detailed,
good.
Aren't they? They're very ornate.
I mean, I suspect that lots of this is stock.
Yeah,
because that's the whole point of going to this sort of studio.
Yeah,
hire it all out. But
it serves the purpose. Yeah. That's what you need it for.
So Agatha Christie disliked these films, but increasingly disliked them. So I'll read out a little what she says about this later on. But she wasn't terribly keen on it, but wasn't enraged either. That came with Murder Ahoy mostly. But years later, of course, they don't just go away. They get shown on TV. And she did write to her agent in about 1970 to ask, can we do anything to stop them being shown on TV?
Oh, really?
Because it wasn't just that she didn't like them being on TV. She didn't like that people were coming up to her and saying, oh, I've just seen a Miss Marple film on television. Yeah. And, she's not a bit like the Miss Marple I thought, and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, that happens today, doesn't it? Like, I know very, very casual Christie fans that will say, like, oh, what's that Haunting in Venice then? I haven't read that one, or things like that.
Yes.
So
you still haven't seen?
I haven't. Mm-hmm. I will do soon.
Oh, we know she's got her eye on the doctor. See, it's chatty, isn't it?
Yeah,
are we learning
because
anymore
it's so kinetic point? The first half with her, she's constantly in it. She's constantly changing costumes. She's investigating. She's on the scent, and then it all just kind of settles down a bit now until the denouement.
But I mean, it is that difficult thing that we're also, I'm also complaining that we don't really know the characters that much. So I guess we do have to have them chatting in a room sometimes.
Well, it doesn't have to be chatting in a room, but we do need to get to know them to some extent. Yeah, for sure. To be fair, the book does also suffer from the same thing, which is that the opening has a lot of vigor and energy. And then by the end of it, you know, or the bulk of the middle is really just successive interviews and Lucy kind of wandering around the house.
Yeah, I wonder if we miss her presence a little bit. Like, because she's a very strong character in the book. She's brilliant. Yeah, she's... One of the reviewers actually said they wondered if she was being set up for as a new detective.
There's a fantastic parallel world where Christie kind of phases out Marple and Pryor and starts writing this new young protagonist in, you know, 6 or 7 novels from this point,
Having complained for years that why did I create these old detectives? But the thing is, like, none of her readers ever cared, so I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to me. You've just got to go with it. I mean, Sherlock Holmes's continuity is even worse. That makes really no sense.
Yeah. Well, and it depends what you're looking for again, doesn't it? It's not, you know, of course it's not photorealism.
And it's funny that she, I think, was perceiving in a particular way about the way that people would read them as well. Because, of course, if you're writing in the 1960s, your contemporary, you know, readership, they're going to have, many of them will have been reading them for decades. And so they're keeping up with them. They're noticing that pace. But as I'm always saying, most people do not read them in order. And indeed have no idea where they sit in the order anyway. And frankly don't care.
I misspoke earlier. I said she's off to die, and she's only just dying now. But she's barely been in it.
She has
Joan.
disappeared.
This is Joan Hickson again. Oh, so they have this tiny little exchange as well. And it's the kiss of death.
Yes.
She's the last person she sees.
Yes.
Miss Marple is the last person Miss Marple sees until
the younger generation.
Did she say the younger generation?
Yes.
Oh, how perfect. What a perfect.
That is perfect.
Passover moment. This whole sequence is really well shot. It's spooky.
It is very spooky. It's very nice. Again, used in the trailer, and quite right too. As we're about to lose Joan Hickson, of course, most people know the story that Agatha Christie wrote her a letter saying about, you know, possibly playing Miss Marple. It's actually a really complicated story that I'm not going to share in this commentary because you can read all about it in the book. But what I can say is that letter...
Sorry, have you
wrote a book about Miss Marple. See, look, here we are. Who is this? Like, because they're going to tell us later who dies there, who the dead person is. And yet, I'm like, well, which one was that? Because without seeing the face, I've got no
happens, if I'm honest.
Maybe she doesn't die. Maybe she just finds a body and gets...
I keep thinking she dies then, but
no, I think you're remembering her seeing the body.
Oh.
But it makes sense that you would think that because, I don't know. So they just say, oh, well, it's him. He's killed himself. Well, obviously he hasn't, you know. But... So Harold, well, who's Harold? They're just not well defined.
Harold.
Oh, there you go. I don't think that's...
Go on, you were going to tell us something about Joan
Oh,
Hickson.
yeah. So this letter, when I put it in Agatha Christie on screen, I used the wording of the letter that was put in the BBC press release. And then I saw later that there was a different wording in the Centenary book, which was published in 1990, that allegedly had this letter written out. And a few people pointed that out. Jamie Burntle, our friend, one person who pointed that out. And then a friend of mine said, oh, I've actually got a copy of that letter that someone had photocopied at some point and sent it to me. And if I can work it out, then it will be a bloody miracle because Agatha Christie's handwriting. So I don't think either of the phrasings that are out at the moment are correct. So I've actually had to put in Marple, this is my best reading, but it might also be this or this.
Oh, wow.
Which is absolutely typical that this is one letter I'd love to have the precise wording.
Yeah.
But I showed it to a few people who know their Christie, have had to decipher Christie writing. And we all struggled with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But, Joan Hickson is such a strong presence, like, because she can be quiet and be intimidating, and you can believe in her.
I do find her quite frightening.
She does.
She does capture that side of the character very well. Yeah.
Lots of people I know had nightmares from watching those Miss Marples.
I remember you saying, Nemesis in particular.
Oh, I don't know Nemesis, but maybe
towards the end of Nemesis, she's quite scary.
Oh yes, that's an amazing performance. But I was just thinking the people who'd said to me that they had nightmares. My sister was always terrified of Sleeping Murder.
Yes,
and funnily enough, shout out to Joe. And funnily enough, when I went to the family archive, the archivist there was saying that he had just, I'm sure Joe won't mind, another Joe, male Joe, won't mind me saying, that he said that he just had realised from having watched it or something, that he'd had been terrified of A Pocket Full of Rye when the maid Gladys is strung up on the thing. But people have told me that several times, that they find them scary.
Well, they're proper adult drama productions, aren't they? In the way that this, as you said, because it went out under a certain certificate, couldn't be. Not that it's trying to be, but... No, it's very much, this is a mystery, we're going to work our way through it and have a bit of fun. And it's for families, yeah. Yes. Oh, look, an Agatha Christie book. You're going to sit down and read an Agatha Christie. They love that stuff, don't they? Oh, they do. Yeah. She gets referenced a few times. I sort of said it earlier, but it is this thing of... there's something about detective fiction that draws writers and readers that love the meta. Yeah. There's something about the pretense that you're asked to go on. Yes. That makes the walls of reality and fiction just that little bit more porous than they would be in other kind of literary genres. Yeah, well, I think there is a suspension of disbelief already for this sort of genre that I think allows you to treat it in a slightly different way. Yeah, but then I mean we all know the tropes of a. So here we know, right? Don't we? Like, this is interesting. What is the point at which you know, aha, it's him? And it's actually here, isn't it? We're not told, but we know that because he's wandered in, it must be him. Even before... The way she looks at him, I think you're encouraged to see that, to think that. And this is a neat get around of that Miss Marple in the book pretends to be joking and Miss McGillicuddy has to see the back. So she's positioned herself by this mirror so she can have both parts, which is such a MG and Margaret Rutherford approach. It's it's cost effective though, isn't it? Yes. They must have saved themselves a pretty penny by not casting Gillicuddy or Lucy. And Miss Marple didn't have to buy McGillicuddy any Christmas presents. True. And I hope that Rutherford got thrice the fee, but maybe not. She got I think it was £16,000 or something. Because that was a big reason why she took it. Which in today's money... Well, don't. That's a bit of an in-joke because one of the main notes I give Mark when I read his writing is, and what's that amount in today's money? And I'm always like, here's the inflation calculator, work it out for yourself. Yeah, but I don't. It is interesting. It is interesting. Because it's so different. But it's really difficult when you have stuff like American dollars, because you're like, what conversion rate do you use now, exchange rate do you use now and stuff. But yeah, for pounds, I think it's fair enough. There we go. I quite like this gradual reveal that if you're really switched on, you'd clock when he comes in the room or before, or when he comes in the room. And if you're really just going with it, which is also fine, letting it wash over you, then you get it explained to you in that moment. Yeah, it's slightly more kind of sophisticated storytelling, I think, than there just being one dun, you know. So now might be, as we're moving towards the end, a point for me to. I've got my quote up of this is what Agatha Christie wrote to her agent after seeing the film. Yep, hit us. So, frankly, it's pretty poor. I thought so that evening in London, so she'd just seen a local screening of it in Devon. But I couldn't say so before Margaret Rutherford, especially as she herself was so good. So she liked Margaret Rutherford as an actor. She does say sort of elsewhere, even around this time, she's not really the Miss Marple that I've written. Yeah. But nevertheless, she gave a good performance. I thought it might seem better if seen in a real cinema with people, but no, that's underlined, definitely not. As my eldest nephew said to me in a sad voice as we left, it wasn't very exciting, was it? And I really couldn't have agreed with him more. None of us thought much of it. The truth is there's no sustained interest. It's muddling with a lot of brothers turning up in the middle and no kind of suspense or feeling of things happening.
It was a difficult book to choose, and I always wondered why they did it. And I do think it's a bad script. I also think it's badly produced, and its photography isn't good, very poor by modern standards of film. So bear in mind that 4 years earlier, we've had Billy Wilder making Witness for the Prosecution, which she did like.
Yeah,
but,
and that is
that's Billy
exceptionally
Wilder,
directed,
you know,
isn't it? Yeah,
this is George Pollock. MGM ought to be able to do better than that. It might have been rather better on television. The best things about it are excellent character studies by Rutherford and her husband and James Robson Justice. But as they haven't much to do with the plot, another kind of plot might have suited them better. So, yeah. And she says, there's no doubt about it, I've spared a good deal by keeping aloof from films.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think you're your own harshest critic, aren't you? And Christie's self-deprecation is on record, and I think sometimes that extends out a bit into the way she feels about adaptations. She's kind of predisposed to dislike them. But I also think, I mean, we all have those moments, don't we, where we're slightly cantankerous, but we just seem to capture a lot of Christies and quote them back at her endlessly.
It's this thing, isn't it? Yes, it is about, and I do feel a bit about, like, because also, what sort of things are you going to be sending to your agent, which is the bulk of it? There's very unlikely, it's very unlikely going to be, oh, I was very happy with everything in this. It's going to be complaints and things you want done differently. I mean, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we always get a good.
And some of the, as you said, some of the points she makes
are dressing gown, isn't it?
Right, are true. It's a bit op art, dare I say?
It's a bit, yeah.
It's a bit fashion.
And this is setting up a recurring theme in these films of the, marriage being proposed at some point.
Oh, of course, yeah. Again, I
usually there's someone who doesn't like her.
She can do it all, can't she? She can do it all, and at the end of the day, men fall at her feet. I mean, what an absolute
You're a fair
hero.
cook. I've just made you dinner. Am I a fair cook?
Go and buy Mark's book. No comment. No, I'm joking. No, it was a lovely. Mark's obsessed with asparagus. If anyone wants the real trivia, is that Dr. Mark Aldridge is obsessed with asparagus.
I just
he
think
serves
it's
it every meal. Honestly, he is obsessed. It's such a strange quirk, but I mean, I like it. Don't get me wrong.
Well, there we go. That's it. Now no more asparagus for you, young man.
And no more facts for you, dear. So that's the last scoop you're going to get out of us.
Oh. See, he's put on his best dressing gown, isn't he? That's why.
Yeah, that's his proposing dressing gown. That's what he wears when he's wooing.
Oh.
But there's the
haven't we all got a proposing dressing gown?
There's the real love of my life, which is good old cheese string.
Oh, and look, one final joke. I mean, does anyone laugh at that joke?
But again, it's like, see, there's this romance and sex kind of subplot that we never really acknowledge, but it's there. Ends with a marriage, sort of. Not really.
Yeah. Look how good were they at timing that. Well done. There must have been someone waving down the track to say, "No, come now."
I think it's like when Billy Piper and Christopher Eccleston run across Westminster Bridge with the bus, timing the buses. They do it 100 times. And the time's right. Yeah. Oh, Peter Butterworth was the ticket collector.
Yes.
I thought he looked familiar.
Because the trailer for this is specially shot, so it's got her having a little conversation and pointing at the audience.
Oh yeah,
and saying, "You saw it, didn't you?"
Yeah.
Even my friend Mr. Stringer will have his doubts when I tell him. Which is so sweet. I love that.
Yeah.
That was fun.
That was really fun. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
So, I've been joking about getting the book, but genuinely, like, it is such a towering achievement of a book. I hope you know that. And
all the stuff that I can't remember off the top of my head are in the book to be read.
Anything that wasn't in this chat, just assume is in the book. Even stuff that's not about Marple, just assume any fact you can. It's like the Guinness Book of World Records. Everything's in there. No, it's been fantastic, and it's such a fun film to revisit, and it in many ways just typify what Marple stands for in the 60s, for better and for worse. So absolutely, it's a nice thing for us to do on this project. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for listening. Yeah, again, stay tuned for a sneak peek of the audiobook after the credits.
Do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us across social media at Christie_time or email us at theswingingchristies@gmail.com. We've also got a website at christietime.com, and you can find both myself and Gray on X or Twitter. So Gray's at classic_Graham and I'm at Dr. Mark Aldridge, and I'm on Instagram too.
And of course, so not only is there Agatha Christie's Marple expert on Wickedness, there's also Agatha Christie's Poirot, the Greatest Detective of the World. That's available in paperback, ebook and audio. And also Agatha Christie on Screen.
Agatha Christie on Screen,
by Mark Aldridge, also available.
The origin story.
Yes, where it all began. And here we are now. Thank you, for listening, ! The Swinging Christies is a Christie Time project by Dr. Mark Aldridge and Gray Robert Brown. This episode was recorded on the 5th of January 2024. Our artwork was designed by Bartlett Studio and our music is by Dar Golan.
HarperCollins presents Agatha Christie's Marple, Expert on Wickedness, by Mark Aldridge, read by Jane Slavin. Meet Miss Marple. It should be no surprise to anyone that Agatha Christie's Miss Marple has always been a reassuring presence. After all, her first appearance followed an exciting but also tumultuous time for Christie. The beginning of the 1920s saw the publication of her debut novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles, the first of many adventures for the Belgian detective Hercule Poirot. Christie then went on to write short stories and thrillers alongside her mystery novels, while her day-to-day life was enhanced by a grand tour in 1922, which saw her travelling the world alongside her husband, Archie. However, by the time that Miss Marple made her debut in December 1927, Christie's life had been turned upside down. In 1926, she had a breakdown following the death of her mother and Archie's decision to leave her for another woman. Both her breakdown and the subsequent well-publicised disappearance took some time to recover from, and yet these difficult events also coincided with the publication of The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, a novel that has since taken pride of place as one of Christie's masterpieces. Agatha Christie's career was flourishing just as her life seemed to be falling apart. So it is notable that it was shortly after these events that she created a new character whose entire raison d'etre was to be a calm point in a stormy sea. Miss Jane Marple is an unmarried older lady who has spent most of her life in the small village of St. Mary Mead, and her quiet observations of people and relationships give her great insight into character. For Miss Marple, these observations serve to prove that whatever else is happening, human nature remains fundamentally the same. Miss Marple herself rarely seeks the spotlight, and in the earlier short stories almost functions as a punchline to a joke being played on other characters, as the thoughtful old lady in the corner outwits her more forthright acquaintances. In doing this, Miss Marple shows that things will be all right in the end. Whatever the drama, the truth prevails, which was and is a reassuring fact for both readers and, we can presume, for Agatha Christie herself. Nevertheless, Miss Marple is not simply some kind grandmotherly figure. She has a steely streak and an unerring ability to frustrate almost as many people as she charms, while her quest for the truth knows few barriers. In Nemesis, the final Marple story to be written, she finally concedes that, I could be ruthless. By this point, Miss Marple has gained a reputation as a person who can detect and remedy the wickedness that she sees in everyday life. She's happy to do this, suggesting that, I hope you dear young people will never realise how very wicked the world is. This book charts the progress of Miss Marple from her short story origins to later ventures on stage, screen and beyond, which now includes new mysteries written by some of the best crime writers working today. A true testament to the staying power of Agatha Christie's creation. Miss Marple's appearances in other media have resulted in some more radical versions of the character, from Margaret Rutherford's comical sleuthing in the films of the 1960s to the quirky Geraldine McEwen portrayal of the 21st century, in which she mourned a lost love. Each interpretation has its own fans, and as we shall see, even Christie's original Miss Marple stories show subtle changes to the character as society develops. Contradictory evidence doesn't allow us to pinpoint precisely when Miss Marple was born. She is both an elderly lady of the Victorian era in 1927, as well as an elderly lady of the World Wars generation in the 1970s. For Christie, Miss Marple was born at the age of 65 to 70, but nevertheless, she lives on to witness the rise of modern society, which she views with fascination. Miss Marple may be nostalgic for a lost past, but she isn't a reactionary. For fellow mystery writer Christiana Brand, Miss Marple was surely created to be the antithesis to Hercule Poirot, who Brand considered to be all shine and show-off. Brand described Miss Marple as the very pink of modest self-deprecation, with her quiet confidence in her own powers, which is robustly bolstered up, should it ever fail her, by the adulation of her somewhat unremarkable friends. These unremarkable associates include her novelist nephew Raymond West, while other important figures in Miss Marple's life drift in and out as stories demand it. Many of them are residents of St Mary Mead, from the local servants to the well-heeled Arthur and Dolly Bantry of nearby Gossington Hall. It may be easy to think of Miss Marple as a character who had much in common with Agatha Christie, but it's wrong to do so. For one thing, Christie was only in her 30s when she created the character, and she later complained that "I never can see why anybody thinks that I resemble Miss Marple in any way," before acknowledging that she may be more like Ariadne Oliver, the fictional mystery writer who appears in several of Christie's novels. As Christie told a fan, Miss Marple tended her garden and lived all her life in the country, which is why her nephew considered, quite falsely, that she knew nothing about life. "I have spent a great part of my life travelling in all sorts of interesting and exciting places, and, nomadic by temperament, my hobby has been travelling and music and a love of gardens, but not much practical gardening." Although Christie rejected the idea that she was a feminist, strong female protagonists were an important feature of many of her novels, and the intelligence and determination shown by Miss Marple is just one example of this. Some of the other examples are obvious, including the likes of Prudence Cowley, better known as Tuppence Beresford, whom we first meet in 1922's The Secret Adversary, and is shown to be more than a match for her eventual husband Tommy when it comes to solving mysteries through adventurous escapades. But in Christie's work, a strong woman can mean many things, from professional nurse Amy Leatheran, who narrates Murder in Mesopotamia, to the icy manipulation of Romaine Vole in Witness for the Prosecution. A woman who will do anything to prove her husband is innocent of murder. A further example is displayed in Christie's unpublished story Witch Hazel, in which Hazel, sick, is boldly set up as a young woman who is angry with the world. The story has a stark opening. Hate. It rose in Hazel like a tide and seemed to flow all over her from the tips of her fingers and down to her toes, steadily, slowly permeating her and suffusing her. She found it curiously satisfactory. When Hazel starts to have premonitions of things that then actually happen, such as a house burning down, those who know her start to fear her, and perhaps with good reason. Hazel, we are told, keeps her hate somewhere deep in her, where it would be ready if necessary. While Miss Marple doesn't utilise the emotion of hatred to any great degree, she does share Hazel's ability to keep secrets locked away until they could be most useful. And one of Christie's grandmothers and influences on Miss Marple offered prophecies that were much dreaded, just like Hazel's. The strength of Miss Marple may not always be obvious, because she plays her cards close to her chest, but her determination always shines through by the end of each mystery. This determination is important both in terms of proving that her conclusions are correct and her unerring belief that justice must be done. In terms of Miss Marple's origins, Christie often cited relatives and family friends as influences, which is unsurprising given her strongly matriarchal family background. "There is no particular model for Miss Marple," she confessed. "Some of her remarks and points of view are reminiscent of my own two grandmothers and of their friends and acquaintances whom I knew in my youth." There exists a letter that appears to show that Christie thought that the name must have been inspired by the beautiful old manor Marple Hall, near to Abney Hall, now in Greater Manchester, which was where her sister lived. Readers are given relatively little background to the character herself, and instead learn much more from the way that she reacts to other people and events. In 1970, Christie wrote to a scholar who had penned his own biography of Miss Marple and confessed that, "If you know the career of Miss Marple from childhood upwards, you know more than I do. Indeed, I have never thought very much about her childhood." In terms of Miss Marple's character, a recent creation was an important influence. I think it is possible that Miss Marple arose from the pleasure I had taken in portraying Dr. Shepherd's sister, Caroline, in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Christie wrote in her autobiography. "She had been my favourite character in the book, an acidulated spinster, full of curiosity, knowing everything, hearing everything, the complete detective service in the home." It was when the story was adapted for the stage by another writer that Christie realised the potential for a reworked version of the character, as the play changed Caroline into a younger love interest, renamed Carol. "I resented the removal of Caroline a good deal," she later complained. "I liked the part she played in village life, and I liked the idea of village life reflected through the life of the doctor and his masterful sister." This turn of events was to have greater significance for Christie. "I think at that moment, in St. Mary Mead, though I did not yet know it, Miss Marple was born, and with her Miss Hartnell, Miss Weatherby, and Colonel and Mrs. Bantry. They were all there lined up below the borderline of consciousness, ready to come to life and step out onto the stage. Miss Marple, the underestimated but ruthless sleuth of St. Mary Mead, had arrived."